Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Wigan Fan TV. This week, Leeds Rhinos versus Wigan Warriors preview. Tonight, I'm joined by Gareth Davis down on the south coast. How's everything down there, Gareth?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Sean. Yeah, really good. Sun's out and it's stopped raining, thankfully. So that always makes everyone a little bit happier down here.
It's like the national tonight. It's just me and Gareth. So it's like the national version of Wigan fans. I'm up in the northeast, Gareth's down south, and Wigan somewhere northwestish, and that's who we're talking about. Last week we spent 45 minutes talking, myself, you and Matt, talking about Sam Tompkins, and we're going to put a ban on Sam Tompkins discussion tonight. Sam Tompkins' transfer is not allowed to be discussed at all.
Can I just say something before we start?
Of course, yeah.
I think the fact the game panned out the way it did meant that no one's talked about that. It's all been forgotten. If Wigan had romped to sort of a 40-point win, then no one have had anything, and everyone had said, "Oh, well, that's what should have happened," and no one have had anything else to talk about. The fact that after 40 minutes we were well behind on the scoreboard, looked like we were going to lose. Give everyone something different to talk about, I think.
Yeah, I mean, one man, and we'll discuss him in just a second. Sean O'Loughlin stood up and put in an amazing performance. But the final score was Catalans 23, Wigan 32. An amazing comeback from Wigan in that second half. Probably one of the poorest first halves that we've seen from Wigan, certainly this season, and something that they can't afford to do tomorrow night at Leeds. What were your thoughts on that game, Gareth? They got delayed apparently on the way over and the way back, and could that have had an effect on that first half performance because they were very sluggish?
Possibly. I think we're looking for excuses there, really, aren't we? We're looking for an excuse, not a reason. Let's give Catalans a little bit of credit. They took the game to Wigan. I don't think Wigan were expecting them to play like they did. We almost reverted to type the back end of last season. If you'd have picked that performance up and put it in last season, you would have said, well, that would have been about right, certainly towards the back end. The second half was something we've been more accustomed to, the way Wigan have played and the way Wigan have played this season. I suppose, if pull an old cliche out, as a stereotypical game of two halves, wasn't it, really? I mean, we were absolutely hopeless in the first half, and there's no other way I could call it something else, but there's probably children listening. And in the second half, we were brilliant. We really, really were good. I listened to Steve McNamara's press conference after. I did feel a little bit sorry for Catalan. There were some of the calls in the game that went massively against them.
Half against Wigan though as well. I was very frustrated with the referee in the first half. So I think potentially over 80 minutes it might have evened itself out.
But I think the key decision was, I think Catalan had a repeat set. Someone knocked the ball down. I can't remember who it was, and they had a repeat set, and then they got pinged for. I think they got pinged for knocking the ball on when Liam Farrell clearly knocked it out. How the referee didn't see it. I agree with you that Wigan perhaps didn't get the rubber degree in the first half, but they weren't decisions that had a massive bearing on the game. I think if Catalan kept the ball in their hand, they may have scored. Then who knows what happens? Wigan got up the other end and score, and it's game over. But I think it was good going forward, the way that the team dug deep, and there was a resolve there to, when the chips are down, they didn't sort of throw the towel in like they did a few times last year. Perhaps
the most incredible part of that performance was, as Stuart have just put his comment on the screen there alludes to, Sean O'Loughlin started the game at prop, finished at 6, and put in one of the best performances I think we've seen from a standoff for a long time. Certainly, since George Williams signed his marquee contract. I would say probably the best performance from a 6 since the Headingley game last year, where George Williams was incredible, scored 2 great tries, but he just controlled the game, Sean O'Loughlin. As Stuart says that, do you think, can Sean O'Loughlin go on in 2019? He's openly sort of discussed it this week, saying he'll assess it after the summer. For a player to start at prop and finish in such an important position as a pivot and control a game, it just shows how good a player he is.
Oh,
35, 36, 35.
Yeah, absolutely. Last week we talked about whether players you can call player, and I won't mention him, whether you could call the player we talked about lots last week a legend. I don't think you can, not yet. You definitely can with Sean O'Loughlin. because he spent all his career at Wigan. In my era of watching Wigan, other than Andy Farrell, he's the greatest loose forward we've ever had. But the fact is versatility, that he can play prop, and he ended up playing at 6, a little bit like Farrell did towards the back end of his career. He was immense, absolutely immense. He really, really was. And I think if you look back to the World Cup, England would have won the World Cup if he had played. I said that at the time. If O'Loughlin had played in the final, England would have won the World Cup. He is that key. Whether his body can allow him to keep playing the rigours of a full Super League season in 2019 remains to be seen. I would think, it's funny, we're talking again about whether a player's going to be at the club next year. I think this one, I honestly think this one, Lenigan, Rads, Sean Wayne will go to him and say, would you like to carry on, Sean? If you do, there is a spot in the squad for you. Because I just think he's too important. I think if he, the timing couldn't have been any better for him with last week. He delivers that performance, then comes out and says, I'm thinking about what I'm doing next year. Well, if I was the coach and the director of rugby and the chairman, I'd say, well, please can your body hold up for 2019, because you are an important member of our squad, not just on the pitch, but off the pitch as well. And you delivered when it really mattered. Did I say the chips were down against Catalans? We were massively on the ropes. And then your captain, but you want your captain to put his hand up higher than everyone else and deliver a performance like that. And he did. And like you say, to finish the game at 6, controlling the game after starting at prop is just, that's incredible. And it will go down as one of the best individual performances by a player in a Wigan shirt that I can remember. You compare it to something like, going back, you remember Radlinski in the Murrayfield Challenge Cup final. It's that much of an influence on the game.
Because we were so far behind as well. There's the circumstances that made him go to 6. Ben Flower went off with concussion and incidentally is in the squad for tomorrow night. George Williams went off with a migraine. So there was the circumstances. He was never meant to play at 6. The circumstances were against him. He moved to 6 and he just looked, that flick pass was ridiculous. And that would be in his career highlights for sure. You just mentioned 13s and Andy Farrell. Certainly in my lifetime as well, Andy Farrell and Sean O'Loughlin are the 2 greatest 13s, and perhaps just before my time and possibly your time as well was a certain Mr. Ellery Hanley. Now, incidentally, I'll just pop this on the screen. Wigan under 16s, it's worth mentioning this. Wigan under 16s played last night, beat Huddersfield 46-18. I apologise for getting his first name wrong, but I'm saying it's Yumila. I've probably pronounced it wrong, but Ellery Hanley's son. Played for Wigan under 16s last night and absolutely dominated the game, apparently. Scored a hat-trick, kicked 7 goals and ended up with 26 points. So he's in the under 16s at this moment in time. So that's certainly another famous name to look out for. I've spoken to Dave Banks in the past, who's one of the coaches at Wigan, about Ellery Hanley's son, and he coached him at Shevington Sharks, Dave Banks, a couple of years ago. And I asked him, what kind of player can we expect? I think he's 15, 16 years of age. It's obviously very early to be sort of even imagine him being in the first team in a few years. But he said he's very much a Callum Watkins kind of player. He said if you wanted to sort of pinpoint him into a mould, which is possibly a bit unfair to do at such a young age, but he said he reminds him very much of Callum Watkins. And I think Dave Banks had a bit of an involvement with Callum Watkins during his time when he was growing up in Oldham as well. So that's certainly a name to look out for. And a famous name to look out for in the cherry and white.
So he doesn't play 13 like his dad did then.
No, he played. He possibly will do. I think he was playing halfback, and certainly he played in the game before the Challenge Cup final last year. He was playing for one of the schools, and the name eludes me at this moment in time. And I think he was on the losing side in the schoolboys final at Wembley. I think he got. Again, I might be wrong on this, but I feel like he might have been voted man of the match, but on the losing side, and he's certainly having an impact at that age level. And he's certainly a famous name to keep an eye on over the next few years.
If he's anything like his father, who the impact he had as a rugby player, not just in the UK, but not many players have gone. Certainly not in that era. Have gone to Australia and done what he did. And I'm sure if you talk to anyone that followed the Balmain Tigers club when he was there, they talk very, very highly of Ellery Hanley. And and just how good he was. There's some great clips on YouTube of what he did when he was at Balmain, and yeah, what a great player. And yeah, if his son's anything like his dad, then that definitely will be one for the future. Absolutely.
Definitely. I thought that was worth mentioning. I mean, it's a big weekend for Wigan Rugby League this weekend. We've got the 16s played last night. The first team are playing tomorrow. The 19s and reserves, I think, have got a game on Saturday. But it's also the start of the Women's Super League on Sunday. And Wigan play Featherstone, who apparently a very good side. They've been in the grand final, I think, last year against Bradford. We can't preview it because neither of us know any of the players in the women's side, but hopefully as the highlights and we can attend possibly games over the season, we can start mentioning a little bit more about the women's side, and we wish them the best of luck in
no, but I think it's great for the whole club that we've got a ladies team now. You know, I mean, the sport should be open to anyone, regardless of gender or anything like that. And you know, the fact that our club seem to have really thrown their weight behind it as well. It's not sort of been a token effort. You know, there's been publicity shoots with the ladies captain. I think I can't remember her name. Not out of ignorance, just because I just didn't catch what her name was. Pictured with some of the first team players. So you know, and our club's a good club, isn't it? Our club always does things properly, and they will give this maximum backing. I think it's great. Really good idea. Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, and wish them the best of the luck. I think it'll be a tough game against a team that's been well established in Featherstone over the past few years. So a big test for them. Big test for the first team tomorrow. Let's move on to previewing the Wigan Leeds game tomorrow. Strange records. Wigan not won at Headingley since 2012. They've lost 6 games in a row at Headingley, and one thing that I wouldn't be brave enough to put to Sean Wayne. I remember a comment that he made about the St Helens record. They'd lost 8 in a row Good Friday up until this year. We're going to have lost 6 in a row. And Sean Wayne said about that record, he would be embarrassed if he had that record. And I just wonder whether he is embarrassed about this Headingley hoodoo, as it's being called, 6 games lost in a row. It's an interesting. I think the last win was in 2012 and won by 56 points to 8. It was a pretty comprehensive win.
I can remember that.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden we've just struggled. Now I'm going to put a stat on, and this is from Bilko on Twitter. One thing that I thought about, and I've stolen this from Bilko, and his Twitter page is on there. I've been to probably 4 of those 6 games at Headingley, and and the point that he makes on there, we always have a fantastic start and we always have a fantastic finish, and we've seemed to lose a game in that middle 40 between 20 minutes and 60 minutes, and you can see on the stats that Bilko's found there, we've lost basically the last 6 games in that middle period of time. Are you concerned going into this game about Wigan's strength in the second half? We've scored more points and conceded fewer points than anybody in Super League in the second half. I just feel that we can't afford to do that tomorrow night against Leeds. Is it a concern for you going into that?
Possibly. I think you can dwell too much on stats, can't you? I mean, stats they are what they are in black and white, but stats don't always reflect what's happened in a game, things that have happened in a game. You say that we haven't won at Leeds since 2012. What you've got to remember is that for the majority of those years, other than 2016 when they had a terrible year, was that the 2016 the year after JP left and Sinfield left and Carly Luluai? Other than that year, Leeds have been the champion side. So is there any disgrace? Well, not the champion side, but Leeds have been one of the best teams in the competition. We haven't always lost by a huge. The game's always been pretty close. We've never gone there really and got absolutely stuffed. So first of all, you would say, is there any disgrace in losing narrowly to the champion team or the dominant team of Super League in the last 5 or 6 years? Probably not. Another thing you've got to remember with Leeds have had a massive strength of being able to change the game from the players they were able to bring on, their interchange. They always kept Robbie Burrow on the bench. And then when teams were tiring, he was great at picking the ball up from dummy half and just scooting forward. So they always had strength from their bench. I'm not saying that we didn't. Perhaps I'm looking at it as an excuse or a reason as to why we haven't picked up points there when perhaps we should have done or we could have done. like you said about George Williams, the fact that those 2 tries were in a losing cause was disappointing. Yeah, I think you looked a bit too much into the stats. To be honest, I think it's going to be a really close game. I think Leeds have been a bit. I don't know the best word.
Leeds come into the game on 13 points. Wigan come into the game on 14 points. Both played 9 games. Pretty similar records.
Yeah.
Leeds 2 defeats came at Ellen Road against Castleford. And away at Widnes, which was a game after the World Club Challenge, which is, pretty much the same as what happened to Hull and happened to Wigan. So, I mean, Leeds are buoyed this week, I would say, by Callum Watkins signed a new contract. I think it was this morning or yesterday. And they also, I'm going to try and put their 19-man squad on the screen in just a second. They bring back some big guns into the side tomorrow. So they bring back Cuthbertson, Delaney and Joe Moon, who's been missing. But one player in particular, I'd like to get your thoughts on this. Their 2 top try scorers, Ash Hanley, who's been playing in centre quite a lot, 8 tries. Callum Watkins, 7 tries from centre. Obviously, the centres are a big place, a big position for them. They'll come up against Oliver Gildart and Dan Sargentson, presumably. He's played the last 2 games in place of John Bateman in centres. How strong do you think that Leeds side is? In particular, perhaps Delaney, Ash Hanley, Callum Watkins, and I guess the resurgent Richie Myler this year as well.
Yeah, that's a really strong side. You'd probably say on paper it's the strongest. Probably it's as strong as our side. It's the strongest in Super League. Possibly they are the reigning champions at the end of the day. Callum Watkins is. I think Callum Watkins is possibly the best centre in the world at the moment. Possibly one of the best centres.
Certainly one of the best, definitely.
Callum Watkins would give any NRL centre a run for his money, and but for an ankle tap, he would have won the World Cup for England. So for Leeds to be able to tie him down to a long-term contract is. I don't want to talk too much about one of our rivals, but I think it's good for the sport, good for the competition in the UK. Let's hope he, celebrated his new contract and has an off night tomorrow. Obviously, that's not going to happen, but you know what I mean. So I think we're up against it there because I think Sargentson is he flattered to deceive so far. I think when he left he was probably at the top of his game. He had all manner of problems in Australia, didn't he? He had lack of form, injuries. He then got in trouble with the law as well, which obviously would have weighted heavily on him. It obviously, like a lot of players, didn't work out for him. He comes back. They say in sport you should never go back because it doesn't quite work. It hasn't perhaps quite worked.
We've seen plenty of instances with that at Wigan.
Yeah. I mean, you have to say that. It's going off tangent. The majority of the Wigan signings, when they've re-signed the players, they haven't come back and been as good as when they went for one reason or another. Joel Tompkins being the biggest. We can't talk about the other one, so we'll talk about his brother. Joel Tompkins being probably the biggest disappointment of that. I mean, the try he scored against Wembley against Leeds. Though I was there, it was a little bit fuzzy because of obviously enjoyed the day, but when I watched it back, that was brilliant. And he goes off to rugby union and doesn't come back such a good player. So, but yeah, if you look at that, going back to that centre combination, Ash Hanley's another one off the sort of Leeds production line, a little bit like Wigan. They're very, very good at producing their own players,
Absolutely.
Aren't they?
I think I saw a stat last week where I think in their team last week, again, I might be wrong, but I think 10 were from the Leeds Academy last week. Obviously, there was a few changes last week. Cameron Smith came in. Cuthbertson, Moon were missing. But yeah, they've got a very... Perhaps it goes a little bit unnoticed when we focus on Wigan, just how good that Leeds Academy has been over the past few years as well. Obviously, Cuthbertson likes playing against Wigan, I think. Every time I've been to Headingley, again, a lot of my visits to Headingley have been fuzzy for one reason or another. But I do remember Cuthbertson playing very well. They've got the decision to make over Joel, Moon and Sutcliffe, who, I assume Moon will come in at half-back. And then what you do with Sutcliffe and Hanley. I mean, it's a fantastic position to be in, isn't it?
Yeah, Brian McDermott's in a lovely position because whichever side he picks is going to go well and you're going to have players disappointed, which if you're the coach, trying to fit 13 or 17, 13 men into a team, and if you what you don't want is to almost be thinking, well, who do I play there, because you haven't got many options. When you've got lots and lots of options, it's a really nice problem to have. And I think that could be one of a little bit why I don't think we've hit our straps really this season, have we? I was trying to find a word to describe.
Yeah.
We looked a bit clunky at times, haven't we? Do you know what I mean? Like take the derby, for instance. Parts of the derby, we looked really, really good. Other parts of the derby, we looked dreadful. I really thought we looked dreadful. Ben Barber's a great player. We made Ben Barber look brilliant by the fact in the first half, he picked the ball up and ran half the length of the field unopposed. So I don't think we've quite hit our straps. And I don't think Leeds have either, to be honest. Leeds have sort of
I think this is going to be a good barometer, I think, of where both teams are.
In a few games, Leeds have sort of just about done enough to win. Last week at Wakefield, on another day they lose the game, but they've just done enough to get over the line.
Well,
I mean, some people would say they perhaps should have beaten Castleford at home when they didn't. So, but yeah, with neither side in sort of sparkling form, something's sort of got to give, really, hasn't it? Let's hope it's away team that picks up the win.
We'll move on to the sort of Wigan team. Just as a sort of a little point there, Super League try-assist, joint top at the moment. George Williams and Richie Myler with 11, which is quite an interesting start coming into the game tomorrow. I mentioned briefly Richie Myler. I think he's impressed a lot of people with his move from Catalans to Leeds, and probably that player that we're not mentioning tonight, his pending move to Catalans, perhaps that was Richie Myler's move, and he's come back from there and sort of shown that he's not ready for that sort of pension club, as I called them last week. Well, looking at the Wigan squad, I heard the term. I can't remember who it was. Somebody on TalkSport talking about a football club as a pension club, and I thought, that's a good analogy for Catalans. I think perhaps unfair, but Wigan's 19-man squad coming into the game tomorrow. Ben Flower misses out after going off in the game on Saturday with concussion due to the concussion rules. So Morgan Escaré returns to the squad. I guess a decision to make for Sean Wayne is he's probably got 3 players vying for a place in that squad to take Ben Flower's place. You either go with Joel Tompkins, bring him back in, Talima Tautai, who's sat out the last couple of games, and Morgan Escaré. So I guess it's perhaps a tactical decision as to whether we go with Luluai doing the full 80 like he did pretty well last week at Hooker, or whether we go back to the switcheroo and put Escaré on the bench, or whether we go with strength, maybe drop Navarrete or Hamlin. Looking at that squad,
I'd go with the strength. I'd go with the strength.
Would you go for a bigger pack then on the bench?
I would. I definitely think. I definitely think that would be the way to go forward. Leeds a strong team up front as well, and in a tight game, you might want to replace one of those tiring forwards maybe as the game. But then you could temper that by saying that I said earlier that Rob Burrow has been great for Leeds coming off the bench for so many years. Someone who's quick round the play of the ball. So perhaps you would want someone like Morgan Escaré who, Leeds have got basically.
Yeah, Leeds have got not a bad option. He's certainly no Rob Burrow, but he seems to have a good game against Wigan. Certainly his Warrington Dames. Brad Dwyer back in the squad, who will be that little pocket rocket off the bench. Stuart's just put there Navarrete and Hamlin to miss out. It's a big game, and I'm not too. Hamlin's debut was incredible. I'm not too sure whether either of them did too much last week in the comeback. Neither of them were bad, but I don't think either of them were exceptional. And I just think the experience perhaps of Joel Tompkins and Tautai may tell, and Wayne may go down that route. And if I remember, I think the reserves are playing on Saturday, and that might be, they may have that option there. But yeah, sorry, would you if you're going for a big pack and there is that option of Escaré, do you think Wayne might go down that route of going back to what's worked well in the first 7 games when Escaré was there?
Yeah, possibly. But then I think you've got to look at the opposition. That will be You know, there is flexibility within the squad there. Part of me would love to see Gabe Hamlin just do his thing in a big game, but part of me thinks that perhaps they're going to be very careful about when he plays. They're going to manage his game time really, really well.
I think you're spot on.
With no disrespect to Hull KR, and to anyone watching with any Hull KR connection, it was the perfect game for him to play, where it's not going to be as intense as playing a Leeds, Saints, Hull, Cass, any of those teams. So you might see Gabe Hamlin play a little bit more, certainly at home, against the teams that are going to be nearer the foot of the table, and possibly in the early rounds of the Challenge Cup. This guy's going to be a superstar for us. I've absolutely no doubt about that. I think did we talk earlier in the season? Someone said he's like the modern day Andy Platt. Was it you said that? Someone said that.
I think lots of people have said that on the comments in the past.
Now, Andy Platt was probably the best British prop forward of that era, late 80s, early 90s, because he wasn't just someone that would take the ball up like a battering ram and then, you know, would get involved with fisticuffs and stuff like that, because Wigan had a few props like that. But Andy wasn't like that. And Kelvin was great to watch. Neil Cowie, Terry, and who can forget Terry O'Connor and Gordon Tallis's punch up in Brisbane, you know. But Andy Platt was sort of almost, I think he was a few years ahead of his game, really. And like you say, Gabe Hamlin's very much like that. And I think the best way for Hamlin will be not wrap him up in cotton wool, because he, you know, but just manage his game time. Absolutely. He's only a young lad at the end of the day. He's only a young lad. So
I think earlier in the year, Mark, when he was on the show, sort of said he's very much like Anthony Gelling. He's a project signing. If you look back to that first year when Anthony Gelling came over, his game time was very minimal. And it's a project signing, but a young signing, and he'll get his chance in the next few years. But I think you're spot on. You know, no disrespect to Hull, but they're kind of games at home where he can be benched if things are going against us. I think perhaps injuries and the Easter turnaround meant that he played last week. Didn't do anything particularly bad, but I think you perhaps will be. I think Sean Wayne will be perhaps be tempted to go back to experience at Headingley. Less where we haven't won since 2012.
No, like you say, I think he'll go back to tried and tested, like you say, what he knows best, rather than someone that's going to be a bit raw and inexperienced. Leeds are a clever side. If you were Brian McDermott, you're going to say, "Well, go after this young lad. Let's see what he can do in a pressure cooker game." Like you say, the games against the teams that are going to struggle in the league, like Hull KR and Widnes and Salford, they're going to be the games where we're going to see Gabe Hamlin and Roman Navarrete as well. I think let's not forget him. He's sort of
Navarette's one of the players playing for a contract. Well, incidentally, he's out of contract as well at the end of the season. So he's
how many more have we got to put to Gary Carter now? We've got to find another 10, haven't we, that are out of contract?
I mean, Gary Carter said 15 out of contract. Phil Wilkinson, in his article about the sort of status of the player that we're not mentioning, I think we got to 5 or 6 at the very, very most on there. But yeah, certainly not 15. I'm still struggling to get 15.
Us journalists,
Stuart again.
Us journalists, you see.
Yeah, absolutely. Stuart says he'll go with a bench of Isa, Esquire, Tautai and Tompkins. Interesting. Isa has been starting the games recently and been playing really well. Another player playing for a contract, incidentally. It's amazing how players start playing well when they're playing for a contract and puts everybody in an awful situation as to whether they do get that contract. Let's get some score predictions. Add your score predictions into the comments and we'll get them on screen. Gareth, where do you think this game's going to be won and lost, and what score do you think it's going to be?
I think it'll be tight. I think it'll be really, really tight. I can think it'll be less than 6 points for the winning team. We've got to break that hoodoo at some point, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think if we'd have lost the game against Catalans last week, then you'd almost be thinking of not thinking that we're going to get beat at Leeds. It's almost damage limitation, but we would have gone into that game really, really short on confidence, massively short on confidence by getting beaten by the bottom of the team that were bottom of the league. The fact we managed to win and we finished the game so strongly, if we can start the game against Leeds how we finished the game against Catalan, then I think we've got a really good chance. But they are very difficult to beat. Ignore that dreadful run we've been on. That, I say, stats can be a nonsense at times. We just need the things to go our way, don't we, really? You win any tight game, you need the things to go your way. No injuries, the first thing. You need a little bit of luck. You need a few decisions, the 50-50 calls to go your way.
Ben Taylor's the referee. Richard Hicks is a video referee. So just in case that influences your decision, Ben Taylor and Richard Hicks are two referees that I think add an extra 15 minutes onto a game with the amount of decisions that they refer to the video ref. So there may be a lot of calls going to the video ref tomorrow night.
But well, yeah, I mean, that's just a nonsense. That really is. You know, it doesn't do the video referee system any favors. And by the way, I'm all for it, but you know, the referee should make the decision. Unless he is totally uncertain, he shouldn't go to the screen. Some of the things they go to the screen for are just laughable. They're absolutely laughable. They want to make the decisions right, don't get me wrong, but any kind of video technology is brought in to eradicate absolute howlers. And you know, it's just checking for onside, offside all the time. It's just a nonsense. Checking for obstruction.
The obstruction
absolute
was
nonsense.
Stupid. Absolutely stupid.
But going back to this game, where the game will be won and lost, the halves are going to be key. I think the halves are going to be really, really key. Like you say, Richie Myler's almost gone back to the player he was at Warrington. It's almost like that. His sojourn at Catalans has been forgotten, and he didn't set the world on fire out there for one reason or another. So that's going to be key. Like you mentioned Joel Moon earlier, it's a bit strange with Moon, really. Who played as a centre for a lot of the time he's played at Leeds. Danny Maguire goes. They don't really bring in a replacement. They just move they move Ash Handley into the centre and they move Moon into halfback.
Yeah.
Be interesting that will to see him come up against George Williams. And well, if George Williams is George Williams named in the squad? I didn't even see that.
He's named in the squad. I mean, he went off with a migraine, so it wasn't a concussion. So he doesn't need to do the concussion test.
Williams will play. Williams will play tomorrow. Yeah. Ben Flower's a big loss, I think. Flower's had a Flower. That's a really serious injury he had last year. So to battle back, I think Flower again. Flower looks as good as the player he did before he got sent off in the grand final, which I think massively affected him. He shouldn't have done it. He was silly, but massively affected him. I think Flower looks as good as he did before then. So Flower's going to be a big loss. But look, it's just going to be a tight game that I think we're going to win by 4 points. There you go. We'll break that hoodoo.
What score? I mean, if you had to sort of say a score?
2016 to Wigan.
2016. Stuart's just put a comment on it. Nickname the Catalans Dragons the Dad's Army. Yeah, I think that's the way that I'm going, Stuart. I think I'm probably giving them a bit of a harsh time by saying they're a pension club. I think the game's going to be very, very close tomorrow. And one, again, going back to the stats, whether you like them or not, I think one of the stats that is actually in Wigan's favour this year, which coming into a game against Leeds is one stat that you over the past, probably since Pat Richards retired, left the club, you would never think would be a stat, and that's that Wigan's conversion rate, success rate is higher than Leeds at the moment. Leeds relying very much on Callum Watkins as a kicker, and we saw that in the Castleford game that kind of cost them a little bit. They've certainly not got a Kevin Sinfield at the club.
No, I was going to say they haven't replaced Sinfield, and we haven't replaced Pat Richards, really, have we? To be honest.
And I just said Sam Tompkins' name, but I'm going to say Sam Tompkins kicking. Yeah, Sam Tompkins kicking has been the improvement. Charlie Hodgson, whatever we're going to pay him, they need to double it, because Wigan's kicking has been a marked improvement on last year, and I do think that's where Wigan potentially might win this game. Yeah. I think earlier on they'll go for if the two's on offer. They'll go for the 2, and I think I've just put a score on here, which is actually what I'm going to go for as well. What Julie's put on 18-20. I think we'll match each other, possibly 3 tries each. and the kicking might just win it for Wigan, which would be a nice change because the kicking has lost us games, including the Challenge Cup final last year. So Julie is sort of very much on my wavelength there. Thank you, Gareth, again for taking the time to join us tonight. I want to, before I go, we haven't got a poem tonight because Matt's away on holiday. If anybody's going to the game tomorrow, myself and Matt will be there, and Mark will be there, and we'll potentially see each other at some point. But we'll certainly see Matt tomorrow at some point. So come and say hello if you see us around. Don't be shy. One thing that I want to say before we go is just a comment on Gareth's rugby shirt. He went into the loft to dig out another retro shirt. Do you want to just talk us through Canberra Raiders shirt, Gareth?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I don't know. It's obviously from the 80s because it's 3/4 sleeves like they all were, and it's so heavy. It's so heavy how the players wore these, because they would have done, because they wore the same ones that you could buy in the shops. It's so heavy. If they got wet, it really would be, a bit of a problem wearing this. But yeah, it's another retro shirt. See what I can dig out for next time.
I'll just finish on the comment from Archie, who's clearly a Leeds fan. Thanks for watching, Archie. Watkins is an amazing player, but we desperately need a goal kicker. We feel your pain, Archie. We've been there, and we've sort of managed to grow our own, I guess, in the form of the player that must not be mentioned and others through the training of Charlie Hodgson. And you've got a rugby union club attached to your club. Maybe the club. Maybe the club need to share your training, and that might be the way forward. Because it certainly, touch wood, seems to have worked for us so far. And finally, I think this was when we were talking about Sean O'Loughlin, but I'm going to take this as credit, seeing as my name's Sean. Thanks, Irene. She says Sean was brill, and I'm going to take that as she was talking about me rather than Sean O'Loughlin. So thanks a lot, Irene. Best of luck to the 19s, the reserves, the first team, and in particular the women's team this weekend. We wish you all the best of luck, and we'll see you, anybody that's there at Headingley tomorrow. And Gareth, thanks again for joining us.
No worries.
And we'll be back on next week to preview the Castleford game at home, which should be interesting. Thanks a lot, Gareth.
Thank you. No worries.